This is Group 6. We are presenting our assignment on Eastman Kodak's quest for digital future. Established in 1888, headquartered at Rochester, US, Kodak played a major role in transforming photography from a professional, studio-based activity into a everyday consumer hobby. By 1901, they offered a full range of products and services for photography. Their slogan, "You push the button and we do the rest," was its famous first advertising campaign. By 1932, Kodak became one of the world's leading multinational corporations with production, distribution, and processing facilities throughout the world. After Second World War, Kodak entered expansion and diversification into chemicals and healthcare too. It was US market leader for most of 2004 to 10, global leader in retail printing kiosks, digital mini labs, and megapixel image sensors. But it had to face competitive challenges and also new emerging imaging technologies. Kodak was alert to emergence of digital tech and introduced products that embodied new imaging technology. Talking about financial performance, Kodak was one of the top US company by revenue, but it slowly started to decline. During 2000 to 2011, its operating losses totaled $5.2 billion. A pioneer of digital imaging with great digital capabilities failed very miserably to profit from those efforts.
So next we will discuss the competencies of Kodak. The case study presented reveals that before the demise of the company, it was leading innovator and producer of quality products and services that were able to cater to the demands of the customers. This was majorly because of its competencies, which can be listed as follows. The first competency was that the company was quite aware of the requirements of the industry, due to which it was able to produce products that were able to deliver the best experience to the customers. The second was that the organization has developed and implemented an effective business model and tagline that appear to attract more clients. For instance, the Kodak Moment concept encouraged more people to rely on Kodak's product to keep their memories. The third was that a proper culture existed that encouraged all the workers to engage in research and development and produce superior products for different markets. Also, at the last, the able leadership of different managers contributed to the company's success spanning over 100 years. Due to these competencies only, the company was able to overcome the various challenges that existed in the industry and prove itself to be the industry leader of its time, and that generated huge profits for the company.
In 2004, photographic giant Eastman Kodak is still struggling to come to terms with the new world of digital imaging while simultaneously facing increased pressure in its long established photographic business. In the traditional film business, Kodak faces aggressive competition from Fuji and is losing market share. The studied article has exposed some of the realities that Kodak had to wrestle with in an effort to remain a market leader. When digital cameras emerged in the industry, this company was on the front line and focused on the best approaches to delivering high quality devices. However, the leader examined the past of the company and realized that the cameras were not the primary source of profit. Instead, photo film had changed the game of the company, thereby making it one of the most successful in the industry. Most of the partners at the company were convinced that Kodak was not going to benefit from digital cameras. The company chose to ignore the emerging disruptive digital technologies, despite the fact that it possessed some of the ideas and the ideas in the industry. The leaders failed to consider and implement most of the appropriate technological changes and could help make it through the new century. The absence of contingency plans to keep pace and continue competing in the changing technological environment would affect the recorded profits, thereby forcing the organization to file for bankruptcy in 2012.
A competitive strategy is a long term marketing plan that companies develop to defend their market position and gain a competitive advantage. While in case of Kodak, their strategy was to gradually integrate digital technology by seeking external knowledge through alliances, acquisitions, and hiring outside talent while still promoting the traditional printed images that made them a household name. Kodak's main strategic mistake was focusing only on the digital imaging business and photo printing, narrowing its chance to succeed in other digital areas such as image capture through cameras and sensors and displays. Meanwhile, other traditional photographic companies like Canon, Nikon, Pentax adopted new transformation to digital photography with less loss because digitalization did not change their most expensive products such as camera lenses. These companies focused on the upgrade of the camera house mainly.
So, my name is Rahil, and in this slide, I'll be evaluating Kodak's approaches towards the emergence of new camera technologies. These new camera technology, especially the digital imaging, pose a threat to Kodak in terms of its market share. And in response, Kodak introduced its own digitalization strategy in which it decided to do a complete transformation towards being a leader in the field of digital imaging. But there were few gaps in its transformation. The first was the inability and failure in understanding the patterns of the external environment, and the second was lack of monitoring the consumer expectations. Uh, Apart from that, Kodak also failed to sway from the printed images, as it did not believe that the digitalization would replace the printed images, and this would lead them to focus heavily on the printed images segment, where they were not able to build up enough market share and later be dominated by Hewlett Packard, who had around 66% of the market share compared to Kodak's 6%. So this misunderstanding basically came from its misunderstanding of its core competencies. Kodak thought itself of as a photography company instead of its core competency of chemicals. So due to which they were neither able to focus and capitalize on its chemicals, as well as was misdirected into completely another segment.
So I am Rishabh Sharma, and I will be explaining the fall of Kodak. In the mid 70s, Kodak owned 95% of the film market and 85% of the camera market in the United States. What Kodak didn't know at that time was an invention by one of its own engineers in 1976, which would eventually lead to the organization's demise. Kodak's engineer Steven Sasson invented the prototype that would eventually become the digital camera. Kodak was able to conclude in 1978 that by about 2008, consumer electronic imaging ought to overtake traditional photography. Kodak wasn't worried about this as it had a leg up on the competition and had plenty of time to prepare for this change. But dealing with major shifts in technology that quickly outdated their research, the transition to digital signaled the beginning of Kodak's decline. Kodak always knew that someday it has to disrupt its own traditional business with its own hands. It's sort of classic innovator's dilemma problem. If you have this great cash cow, which is your film camera business, and you are one of the dominant players, then you are reluctant to totally disrupt it yourself. By the time the 90s rolled around, Kodak's push into digital was in full force. They pumped around 2 billion into research and development for digital technologies. Kotak was moving full stream ahead to digital, and each attempt was a flop, whether it was the massively overpriced DCS 100, which was quickly outpaced by the growing capacity of hard drive, and the DC20, an incredibly cheap camera that everyone agreed took awful pictures. The disc camera was a disaster in itself. By the 90s were a time when Kotak started spinning off its other businesses to pay down its debt, selling its entire office imaging business, the digital printer, and the copier division, and turning its chemical division into Eastman Chemicals. With the failure to successfully pivot to digital camera on 19th January 2012, Kotak finally filed for bankruptcy. But soon enough, Kotak launched its own cryptocurrency called Kotak Coin in 2013. The cryptocurrency system allowed photographers to register work that they can license and then receive payment. It was coming at a time when it seemed like everybody was announcing a coin and as a way to raise a bunch of money because there was so much mania around it. And thus Kotak, which is a publicly traded company, ventured into this. And now apparently it's a pharmaceutical company. The American government gave a 765 million loan to Kotak for producing pharmaceuticals. And the story of how Kotak is trying to become a pharmaceutical company is just as strange as the announcement itself. This is how Kotak went from selling nostalgia to making drugs. Thank you.